Thank you all for coming this evening for the latest in the Comment Visions series with European Voice and Euronews in association with Shell. We have another very timely and topical subject for this evening's discussion. The offshore oil and gas prospection, exploration and production, the proposal for a regulation from the European Commission, which came out in October 2011. I don't need to go into much detail. You know the background to this piece of legislation. It came after a review of offshore oil and gas safety following the Deepwater Horizon disaster in April 2010. It aims to ensure the highest level of protection and emergency planning provision throughout the EU. I have far greater experts than I could ever hope to be on this piece of legislation, so I'll hand over to them very shortly. Just to say, the legislation is now entering a very critical stage. I understand the industry and research committees due to vote on Mr. Bellet's report on the 9th of October. And I understand there's a possibility of an agreement with Council before the end of the Cypriot presidency, depending very much on the gaps between the Council's position and the Parliament's position. As you'll be aware, it's a highly contested proposal with very serious implications for industry, but also for maritime and environmental safety. The experts we have will talk you through some of the issues, but they include, of course, the form of the legislation, the scope of the rules, to what extent they apply to EU companies operating outside the EU, the scope of environmental liability and financial security, the question of independent verification, and special regimes for sensitive areas. We have a very strong panel this evening, as always. We're going to be starting off with Jan Panek, who's the head of unit for oil and coal in DG Energy, followed by Ivo Bellet, who's the rapporteur on the regulation. Then Steve Cromar, chairman of the Wells Experts Committee for the International Association of Oil and Gas Producers, who comes from ConocoPhillips. And to round off, we'll hear from Paul Frisbold, who is the chairman of Bellona Europe. I think you're familiar with the format. Each panelist will have 5 to 7 minutes to make some introductory remarks. Then we'll have a quick discussion with the panel, and then we'll open the floor for what I hope is a lively and informative debate. We will continue that debate until just before 8 o'clock. We were hoping to be joined by Joop Koppes, Vice President of Production, Europe from Shell, but unfortunately Mr. Koppes had to have an urgent operation last week, which has prevented him travelling. We wish him a speedy recovery, and concluding remarks will be made today instead by Alex Trott of the Shell Brussels office. With no further ado, I would like... Oh, sorry. Sorry, okay. With no further ado, I'd like to hand over to Jan Panek, Head of Unit for DG Energy in the European Commission.
What do I do?
I
don't do anything. It's on. But I'm magnetic. Okay. Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for the invitation to participate in the discussion today. And is it me who's giving all the echo, or what can I do to stop it?
If I just move the microphone.
Okay. So it's a pleasure for me to be here today and to introduce the subject by briefly summarizing the proposal that the Commission put forward about a year ago. You will recall that the proposal was only a last in a series of initiatives that the Commission took in the wake of the Deepwater Horizon accident, and the proposal was trying to rather than introduce changes or tinker with existing legislation, the proposal intended to lay grounds for a completely new piece of legislation that would govern offshore activities in the oil and gas industry, because from a analysis of the state of play and from the analysis of existing European legislation, we came to a conclusion that it was indeed the best way of improving the regulatory framework in the EU. The best way to achieve that was to set up a comprehensive new framework law.
Mr. Panay, I'm very sorry. Can I just interrupt you 1 second? Your slides are available now.
My slides are available. Excellent. Thank you. So, if they can be shown somewhere. The first reason why we felt that a European law would be appropriate was that the geographic distribution of offshore activities along EU shore are actually well spread all over European waters. We do have a lot of activities in the North Sea, and North Sea is usually the area, geographical area, that captures most of the headlines, is most known, produces enormous economic benefits in the European context, but there are also not negligible offshore activities in the Mediterranean, in the Black Sea. And what is important, the whole European offshore is becoming more and more active in exploration and production activities, and that certainly concerns not only the North Sea area. So we felt that a European legislation that would put a comprehensive framework to for everybody, that would raise everybody to the same standard, would be most appropriate. We followed the. I see the slides are not available, so I can't show you a map, but you would see on the map within 2 seconds what I was just trying to explain in 2 minutes.
You use the beamer.
Voila. Well, there is a map which documents what I just said. What is even more important is that if you don't look at the productions themselves or operations themselves, you look at the economic zones, you actually see that the area is quite large, the area that could potentially be host to offshore activities. And what you equally see is that large areas actually belong under the jurisdictions of member states that at the moment do not necessarily have extensive operations or no operations at all. So they would be at some point potentially newcomers to the game, or at least sort of rising stories. Hence the need for European legislation. We have defined several objectives for the European action with four clear objectives. We wanted to attain best industry practices across the whole of EU that could ultimately feed a process of raising of global standards across the globe. The EU would achieve a comprehensive, coherent record as a best practice area when it comes to regulation, and therefore could actually have a strong voice in global efforts. Second, we wanted to ensure that best regulatory practices that exist or may be known or may be developing over time are applied throughout the EU, not only in some of the jurisdictions which are already well known as the let's say gold standard bearers, but also in all the remaining jurisdictions of the EU. The third objective related to emergency preparedness and response. Again, the idea was to achieve the highest possible degree of emergency preparedness and the most effective degree of coordinated, strong response, again, in all European offshore regions. And finally, the objective was to improve and clarify existing liability and compensation provisions, make sure that the parties, the citizens or businesses affected by an adverse event in the industry are not left without only with damages and cost and no compensation. I'll skip the measures because there was a host of measures to achieve those goals, from which we selected those that came out positive from the impact assessment study, and they were together crafted into a legislative proposal which revolves around several key design principles. First of all, well, the first point is generic. These represent measures to prevent major accident. More importantly, the design principle followed is the principle of risk-based planning and operations, which means that the focus is on major hazards and their consequences and tries to minimize the risks of such hazards by set of rules that are goal setting, that set the goal onto the licensee, the goal of minimizing risks, and then ask the licensee or the obliged party to come forward with solutions that will be convincingly irrefutable by experts in the regulator's practice. The next design principle is the focus on best practices by both operators and regulators. We did not deny that there are existing best practices, there are existing high-level performers in the industry, but also in the regulatory, on the administrative side. We wanted to build on those. We wanted to integrate those and spread those across the EU into a coherently EU-wide regime. There was a third design principle which stresses transparency and sharing of information. We believe that it's through increased transparency both in the planning stage and in the execution and operation stage that the industry as well as the regulators are going to be held to the highest possible standard of performance, because they will be subject to suitable public scrutiny. The next design principle of coordination and cooperation, we felt that all the preceding goals, the spread of best practices and the high degree of transparency would be best achieved if there is a coordination between different jurisdictions, and if regulators cooperate amongst themselves in developing most suitable administrative practices in overseeing the industry, and possibly also involve in this process over time non-European countries, so that we also spread high level of safety to areas outside of Europe, from which nevertheless we can be affected, for example, in the Mediterranean. Then the final principle is the last bullet point. The legislation foresees an arrangement which would allow it to be highly dynamic, to actually react to evolving situation and state of intelligence in the industry and in the regulatory environment, so that the technical rules which are set in the legislation, to the extent that such need to be set at European level, could be gradually updated or brought up to date over time as situation evolves through the processes of delegated powers to the Commission and in cooperation with the Council and the Parliament. So these are the key principles. I think we have some slides there on the procedure, but I believe, oops, sorry, I'm using it the wrong way. These would not necessarily be of interest, because we have MEP rapporteur with us, and I think he can summarize it certainly much better than a slide from the Commission could. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Mr. Panik. Okay. I'd like to hand over in that case to Ivo Bellet, who I'm sure you are very well aware is a Belgian Christian Democrat MEP and the rapporteur on this regulation. Mr. Bellet.
Thank you very much, Mr. Taylor. I will try to be as brief as Mr. Panik and leave as much room as possible for the Q&A and for the debate. Because thanks very much for the invitation, of course. Excellent timing. You referred to the upcoming votes in the Parliament, tomorrow in the Jury Committee, day after in the ENVI Committee, and then the week after, no, 2 weeks after that in our own Industry and Energy Committee, so timing is excellent. Let me stress that we have already had in the recent days, weeks and months, had an intense dialogue, intense discussion with all the stakeholders present here at the table, but also other stakeholders. So I think that we are rather well informed today, but nevertheless, of course, we are looking forward to additional input, and we expect that also tonight. So thanks very much for that opportunity. I won't repeat what Jan has put on the table here, so I will I'll build on it and perhaps concentrate on those issues that are, for the time being, at the center of the debate and discussion in the Parliament, and at the center also of most of the amendments that have been tabled in the past weeks. First of all, the legal form, of course. We know that there is an intense debate going on whether it has to be a regulation or a directive. There are fears that the redrafting of equivalent national legislation as a result of a regulation would diverse the resources from the safety assessment and inspections. So, and because of this fear being shared not only by a lot of stakeholders, but also by the trade unions, by some regulators, by I think a majority of the member states in the council. Therefore, we believed it useful to table an amendment as myself as a rapporteur in order to change the legal form from a regulation to a directive. Nothing decided yet, of course. It's an amendment, it's a proposal. Nothing has been voted yet. But to concentrate on establishing a robust legal framework, not within a legislation, but within a directive. So that's the first important issue, it's the legal form. Second important theme, of course, is the independency of the competent authorities, which was one of the main issues in the report, the US report that has been drafted after the Macondo incident now 2 years ago. One of the main lessons learned from Macondo has been that how crucial, and is today, how crucial it is to ensure the independence of the authorities that are responsible for the safety and for the environmental risks of operation, and stress that those that they have to be independent, of course, from the those authorities that are responsible for the issuing of the authorizations for drilling. And we understand. First remark in this respect, we understand that several member states, especially those member states with emerging offshore activities, that they find it difficult to implement and to foresee those new structures, independent structures within the administration of as a new pillar, as a new administrative authority. But we are convinced within the Parliament that with the prospect of new oil and gas revenues, it must be possible, it has to be possible to set up those necessary structures as new structures apart from existing administrative capacity or within the administrative capacity that is available for the time being. I suppose that we will get more questions about this issue during the debate and during the Q&A. Several amendments have been tabled within in the Parliament, in several committees, in order to create a new European agency. We know that the trade unions in this sector also are in favor of creating a European agency on top of the national regulators. There's also we haven't tabled a proposal in that direction, but there are other colleagues who have done it. There are also proposals with regard to EMSA. A lot of colleagues want to enforce, to strengthen the role of EMSA with regard to safety of offshore operations. With regard to the mandate of EMSA, I have to draw the attention of a lot of colleagues, but also of people present here, to the fact that recent negotiations between the European Parliament and Member States, they were concluded recently on that issue, and we have to take into account the new mandate that has been agreed upon with regard to EMSA, which doesn't go that far as some colleagues would like to see. So we have to take into account that new mandate. But within that new mandate, of course, certain new activities for EMSA could be possible, but we are rather in favor of. And that's why we also tabled amendments with respect to this issue to strengthen the cooperation between within the EU authorities group. And we think that platform should be exploited to the full. It's an ideal forum for exchange of experiences. It's an ideal platform to realize what Jan has put forward as one of the main objectives of this proposal, is exchange of best practices, is better coordination, and of course in the long run, or in the medium run, a better safety and legislative framework. Very important and at the heart of the discussion is of course the issue of the financial guarantees, set up a financial or guarantee financial security systems to guarantee operators that they can pay the costs in case of an incident, in case of pollution, so that not only we as taxpayers, but so that local communities, so that small businesses do not end up paying the bill, of course. We have to look carefully into this aspect. We all know that we have to find a solution, but we have to be careful, because currently, as is expressed in the Commission proposal, in the Commission document, no financial security instruments, including risk pooling arrangements, are available. So we will have to be, or try to be, creative in order to find a solution. And that's why we, together with other colleagues, have tabled proposals proposing mutual pollution insurance schemes to be established in certain EUC areas, with a mandatory membership for the operators. Jan also referred already to the aspect, and the moderator also referred to the aspect of the verification, which of course is also a crucial element within this proposal, especially whether we want a second party or third party verification. What counts for us? We have discussed a lot about this issue. Last week in Strasbourg, we had a very good debate organized, a breakfast debate organized by OGP with several stakeholders. And we also talked about second and third party verification. But I think that we agree that what's necessary, what counts, is that the independence of the verifier is guaranteed. And this is true. This holds for the second party verification as for the third party verification. Let me explain. It doesn't mean that because you're a third-party verifier that you are automatically more independent than a second-party verifier, because third-party verifiers, of course, also are contracted by operators and are sometimes involved by operators for several years. So there is also, or often, a very close contact between third-party verifiers, potential third-party verifiers, and operators. So what counts, I repeat, is the independence of the verifier. I do have to finalize. Yeah, I will skip some elements and go to perhaps to the last sensitive issue, Mr. Taylor, which is, of course, the sensitive areas issue, the Arctic. A lot of proposals and amendments have been tabled by a lot of colleagues on the Arctic. It goes without saying that risks for operations there are higher, because we are in remote and sensitive, very sensitive environment. And this has to be reflected, it should be reflected, and it is a part of the Commission proposal already. It should be reflected, the fact that we are confronted with a higher risk, it should be reflected in the major hazard report, of course, as we foresee in this legal framework, which is based on a risk-based approach. I will stop here, Mr. Taylor. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bella. I appreciate that. Okay.